Picture the scene. It's the bitter, biting cold of 1989. The air is absolutely thick with tension, and the dark night sky over Berlin is just illuminated by the constant flash of cameras. You can feel it, the glow of history literally changing forever, right before your eyes. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a dark, incredibly dramatic story. We're looking at one of the most defining and quite frankly terrifying symbols of the 20th century, a brutal, concrete monument to the Cold War. Today, we're going to witness the sudden rise, the deadly enforcement, and the ultimate, almost miraculous fall of the Berlin Wall.
Just listen to the first-hand accounts from that night. People describe the crowd as crying, shouting, and breaking it apart with their bare hands. I mean, think about that. This wasn't some coordinated demolition by a city construction crew. Not at all. This was a raw, chaotic, totally triumphant explosion of human emotion. Thousands upon thousands of everyday people had gathered in front of this massive barrier, and they weren't just chipping away at a wall, right? They were actively destroying a physical manifestation of fear, a division that had cast a dark, suffocating shadow over their entire lives.
But to really understand the sheer catharsis of that moment, we actually have to rewind. Let's go back to 1945. World War II has just ended, leaving this completely fractured globe in its wake. And Germany, the very epicenter of the conflict, was quite literally sliced right down the middle. Now, this wasn't just some abstract political line drawn on a distant map in a boardroom. It was a harsh physical reality. The entire nation was divided into East and West. And Berlin? Well, the capital city was resting entirely within the Eastern Territory, yet it was itself split right down the middle into two distinct parts. It was the beginning of a geopolitical fracture unlike anything the world had ever seen.
So, out of that wartime rubble, two completely different worlds started to emerge. On one side, you have West Germany. Supported by the United States and its allies, it rapidly became more developed. They embraced freedom, and they were quickly rebuilding their economy. But on the exact opposite side of this ideological chasm was East Germany. And here, the reality was bleak. It fell under strict Soviet and communist control. Personal freedom was heavily limited, and the citizens there lived under this constant, brooding atmosphere of heavy state surveillance. You had two entirely different, opposed realities, separated by nothing more than a city street.
Millions. I really want that number to sink in. Millions. That is the number of people who simply decided to walk away. Because when faced with the incredibly oppressive reality of East Germany, well, human nature just took its course. People wanted out. They sought the freedom and the opportunity that was, at that point, literally just a walk away into the West. And this wasn't just a slow trickle of people. It was a massive, desperate exodus. For the East German government, this sheer volume of citizens fleeing was absolutely terrifying. I mean, they were hemorrhaging their own population, and they knew, without a doubt, they had to stop it at any cost.
And that brings us to a date that honestly plays out like a terrifying plot twist in a thriller movie. August 13, 1961. Just imagine this. Going to sleep in your bed in a unified, albeit very tense city, and waking up the next morning to find your world permanently, physically severed. While the citizens of Berlin slept, soldiers moved in under the cover of darkness. They abruptly blocked off the main roads. They unspooled these endless coils of razor-sharp barbed wire straight across the city streets. In the dead of night, they began constructing what would swiftly become the Berlin Wall. The trap had literally been sprung overnight.
And beyond the grand geopolitics, there was a devastating, deeply personal human toll here. Because this happened so incredibly fast, overnight, families were literally cut in half. People living on the eastern side who just happened to be visiting family or friends in the west that evening were suddenly stranded. They couldn't go back. Best friends could no longer just meet up for a coffee. Children were suddenly cut off from their grandparents. People woke up, looked out their living room windows, and realized their city, their home, was divided forever. The trauma was immediate, and it was profound.
And we need to be clear here, this wasn't some small picket fence. 150 kilometers of solid concrete. 150 kilometers. It is a staggering, almost unbelievable scale of entrapment. This massive, ugly scar snaked its way directly through residential neighborhoods. It cut right across busy streets and ran alongside city canals, physically trapping the citizens of East Berlin inside. It was a sprawling, suffocating monument to isolation, completely designed to keep people in, no matter the cost.
Because it wasn't just concrete, you know. The authorities engineered an incredibly intricate machine of death. Towering guard posts loomed over the barren landscape. You had heavily armed soldiers on constant 24/7 patrol, blinding searchlights piercing through the night, miles of razor-sharp barbed wire. And without a doubt, the most chilling part of it all,
strict shoot-to-kill orders for anyone even attempting to cross. Make no mistake, the wall was designed to be a lethal, completely impenetrable fortress.
But here's the thing about the human desire for freedom. It's an unbelievably powerful force. Those deadly defenses, they didn't actually stop people from trying. They just made them far more desperate and incredibly inventive. Citizens risked absolutely everything to flee. They dug these elaborate, completely suffocating tunnels deep beneath the concrete. Mechanics engineered secret, cramped compartments inside cars just to smuggle people across the heavily guarded checkpoints. And in one of the most astonishing, movie-like acts of defiance, people even flew over the wall in homemade hot air balloons. It became this high-stakes, life-or-death game of cat and mouse.
The truly tragic reality, though, is that while some of these desperate, incredibly brave attempts actually succeeded, many did not. Countless individuals lost their lives attempting to cross this deadly divide, gunned down in the mud and the wire simply for wanting the chance to live freely. It's a dark, very solemn reminder of the true, bloody cost of this concrete barrier.
But, as we know, history is never truly static. Fast forward with me to the 1980s, and this massive, oppressive system finally began to crack. The mighty Soviet Union, the very backbone of East Germany's control, began weakening, both economically and politically. By the mid-1980s, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduces these unprecedented reforms, sending actual ripples of hope across the entire continent. This inspired everyday people to demand change, and soon, protests demanding freedom were spreading like wildfire across Eastern Europe. By 1989, that fire had firmly reached East Germany, with massive, undeniably powerful demonstrations filling the streets. The people were finally united in a roaring shout for freedom.
Which brings us to what has to be one of the most unbelievable, bizarrely dramatic moments in modern history. I want you to ask yourself, could a single, mistakenly spoken sentence bring down 150 kilometers of heavily guarded, lethal concrete? After decades of intense geopolitical chess, terrifying nuclear standoffs, and immense human suffering, could a simple, almost comedic clerical blunder actually be the killing blow?
The answer, incredibly, impossibly, is yes. The date is November 9, 1989. The tension in East Germany was at an absolute boiling point because of these massive protests. So in a desperate attempt to pacify the huge crowds, the government decided to loosen travel restrictions just a tiny bit. But during a live, nationally televised press conference, an East German official completely fumbled his notes. He mistakenly announced to the entire world that citizens could cross the border immediately. Immediately. It wasn't planned. It absolutely wasn't authorized to happen right then. But the words were spoken, and they were broadcast live into millions of living rooms.
What followed was a breathtaking, unstoppable chain reaction. First, the news just spread like lightning across television and radio. Every household heard this unbelievable proclamation. Second, within mere hours, thousands upon thousands of East Berliners rushed directly toward those heavily armed checkpoints. And third, the climax. The border guards, who were completely confused, totally lacking any clear orders from their superiors, and vastly overwhelmed by the sheer size of this peaceful but incredibly determined crowd, finally yielded. They just opened the gates.
For the first time in nearly 30 years, 3 decades of darkness, of families violently torn apart, of living every single day under the shadow of machine guns and guard towers. And it was over in an instant. The gates were open, and an absolute flood of humanity poured through, crossing freely between East and West Berlin for the first time without the crippling fear of being shot. The sheer euphoria of that night brings us right back to where we started this explainer. Strangers weeping and hugging each other, long-lost families finally reunited, entire crowds erupted in massive celebrations in the streets. People literally climbed up onto the very wall that had imprisoned them, taking hammers, pickaxes, whatever tools they could find to tear it down piece by piece. The entire world watched through their television screens as one of the most powerful, imposing symbols of the Cold War physically collapsed before their very eyes. And the geopolitical aftermath? It was as rapid as it was profound. The fall of the wall completely shattered the illusion of Soviet control. Less than a single year later, the divided nation finally healed its deep wounds. East and West Germany officially reunited. The entire Cold War map of Europe was entirely redrawn overnight, and it was sparked by the unstoppable collective will of the people. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought.
The fall of the Berlin Wall remains one of the greatest, most cinematic symbols of liberation in all of modern history. It is a stark, incredibly powerful reminder to all of us, no matter how deep the division seems, no matter how much concrete is poured or how much barbed wire is strung, no wall can stand forever when people truly unite for freedom. But it does leave us to wonder, doesn't it? What invisible walls are we allowing to be built today, and what exactly will it take for future generations to tear them down? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.